element, right?
Yeah, relatable. Very relatable. With particularly creepy stairs.
Mm-hmm.
No, the obligatory scene doesn't mean you're obliged to write it. But if you omit the obligatory scene, you have to replace it with something equally as powerful. So I think what the writers of the show were hoping, right, is that the removal of the obligatory scene between Jon Snow and the Night King, robs the whole thing of huge amounts of emotional power. But I think they were hoping, and I'm just guessing here, that when Arya Stark flew out of the shadows and killed the Night King, it would be a fist-pumping moment. But I don't think it was, right? So I think that it could not be replaced, right? And I think because, and again, I'm just guessing here. I think one of the crucial elements that didn't work in that is that Arya Stark had her list, and she was passionate about killing people on the list, and we all supported her. We're just like, yeah, do it. Take out all the enemies of the Stark family. The Night King was not on her list.
Yeah.
So it just didn't, she's coming out of the shadows, but there's no emotional power to it, right? It's completely robbed.
Towards the end, they got really into just what can we write that just subverts expectations. Because apparently they admitted to reading fan theories, and then they change when they were writing it. They change it based on like if someone had guessed what they were.
No, no, I can categorically say that's not how the writing process works, right? Yes, they are. There's an awareness to what the fans are expecting, right? So there's a little bit of that, but it's not this idea that you go in and simply write to subvert expectations, right? There's like countless hours, days, weeks spent trying to figure out how the story all fits together. If you want to see kind of a good example of story paramedics called in the last minute to fix up a story, then watch the Fantastic Four, right? The newest one by Josh Trank.
Yeah.
So then you can understand how that movie felt like a patchwork quilt of story ideas, right? But those guys were literally called in the last minute to try and salvage the movie, right? And that's really, really different from the final season of Game of Thrones. Even though it may seem quite random, all of the sequences were well constructed, right? So, it's not, and especially a show that size with the time they had in development, they're just not going to throw a bunch of ideas at it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just they didn't account for. So the best example is they thought maybe that the Arya Stark moment would have much more emotional power than it actually did. They also thought that by having Jon Snow face the dragon, it would be good enough, right? And obviously it wasn't, right? So, and that stuff, you don't have enough clairvoyance to know that that's not going to resonate with an audience, right? So I'll give you an example about what I mean. The fight between Jon Snow and the dragon was beautifully crafted, right? In a different movie would have been exciting, or in a different TV series. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? I'm talking about craftsmanship. Yeah.
Sorry, I thought my mic didn't pick me up when I said yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. So that's what I'm talking about. And again, I want you to kind of step back and look at the creative process. Look at the creative process of films and TV shows that don't resonate with you. Not in the hopes of forgiving them or understanding that, they had production issues, but more just to kind of take a look and say, okay, well, that didn't work. Why didn't it work, right? And it's just to help facilitate a bit of understanding, right? So it's this idea of, well, I know those guys worked really, really hard on that CG visual effects, but that robot looked really fake, right? And then the easy answer would be to say, well, that robot looked really fake because they didn't put any time into it, or whatever. They made it in Blender, right? So that's why it looked fake, or just checking to see if Davin's awake.
We have no input on Game of Thrones, so we're just listening in. we haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it? All right,
No,
okay.
I haven't seen it.
Okay, got ya.
For the record, season 6 has 2 of the best episodes of television I've ever seen.
So sorry, season 6.
Season 6, the last 2 episodes, the Battle of the Bastards.
Yes, yeah.
Finale.
That was a massive fan favorite, Battle of the Bastards. I thought it was really exciting, but I don't know if I'd say that was my favorite episode. It was definitely one of them. I really enjoyed it.
I think that paired with the following episode, with Cersei's trial.
Yes.
With the cult, they worked really well together, and I never almost had a heart attack as much as the sheer tension that I had while watching those episodes.
Yeah.
I like the episode that was just black.
What? David forgot to press play.
David, the closet goth.
No, they didn't bring any lights to the set.
Oh right, yeah. Oh yeah. I remember that. No, again, I think there were some issues there as well. I mean, if you look at the digital intermediate guys, they didn't really kind of make good color decisions, and and just it could also have been just the. Sorry.
I said, why didn't they call me? I was ready. God damn!
You have to remember that the footage went through several hands to be fixed, right? And it's not just the digital intermediate, the colorist, but it also went through the visual effects team, and they've had LUTs to work with and all kinds of stuff, and they still ended up in that place, right? Granted, if you don't have enough Luma value on your pixels, there's not much you can do to salvage it, but it feels more like it was a creative decision that didn't quite work, right? So that'll sometimes happen, right? So for example, we could be in a story meeting and we'll go, hey, we got this huge battle between 2 armies, right? Why don't we deliberately jump the axis? Because that will feel like the confusion of battle. When you're in the middle of battle, sometimes you don't know which way you're facing and you don't know who's the good guy or the bad guy. Yeah, great idea. You know what? Let's jump the axis and make everything handheld, right? Because it's just frenetic and it's full of energy and it's hard to focus when you're in the middle of the battle. So when we stick that camera right in the middle of the battle, the audience will feel like they're there. And then you watch it and you go, holy shit, I don't know what's going on, right?
Is it the Bourne Ultimatum?
I was thinking of the opening battle with Scipio's army in Gladiator. So we got 2 Roman armies. So check this out. Here's the problem. 2 Roman armies. They both look the same. They're all wearing Roman armor. And they made some really interesting camera choices. And I had completely no idea what was going on during that battle. And whose side I should be rooting for, right? So for me, and I'm probably going to go back and watch it again because maybe I feel like I'm judging it too harshly. But my first impression of that Gladiator battle, wow, badly shot, badly edited. Have no idea what's going on, who's winning, right? So that's the balance, right? So you might be trying to recreate something. Okay, so for example, I want to recreate this idea of somebody being completely disoriented and totally lightheaded. So I'm going to constrain a handheld camera to a guy's chest, and the camera's going to tilt all over the place and go all kinds of crazy Dutch angles, and it's just going to be frenetic. And then you might go, no, that sounds like the audience won't be able to follow that. And then you watch Snatch or Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, the scene where the one of the main characters loses his big poker match, and they do exactly that, and it works beautifully. Do you see what I mean? So sometimes you can come up with these ideas that sound fantastic, and then when you execute it, it just doesn't work. And vice versa. You can come up with ideas that sound terrible, and then you try it, and it's like, holy, that really works well. This is why I constantly tell you guys, don't talk it up, mock it up, right? And they could have made the decision with the episode where everything was dark. They might have said, well, it's just like being in battle, right? That's that sense of disorientation, not knowing what's going on, not being able to see clearly what's happening, right? And that's all fine and good. That might be able to capture an emotional moment, but story-wise, you need to do certain things so the audience can follow what's going on. So I don't necessarily think... Let's put it this way. I think if they didn't bring lights to the scene, if they didn't, do anything to change the illumination of the scene, but they changed the camera direction and they changed the editing so that one side was always on one side of frame and the other army was always on the other side of frame, and then maybe alter a little bit of the contrast. So you might have one army having more contrasty type of clothing that would sort of stand out even though it's dark, and then the other just dark. Do you see what I mean? Just a little bit of art direction changes, a little bit of camera changes may have made that work. You don't know. Right?
Yeah.
Like, you could have brought lights to the scene, fully lit the whole thing, but not change any of the camera angles or camera direction or editing, and you end up with a gladiator opening battle. The audience is still going, what the hell? Right? So I think that's one of the frightening things about any kind of entertainment property, is that it's never dependent on any one thing. Like, all the ingredients have to work, right? And that's what's really frightening. And let's say you get all the ingredients working. Story works, the camera direction works, the lighting is beautiful, everything's fantastic. You shout action, and the actor puts in a piss poor performance, and the whole movie's ruined, right? So it's frightening, right? So. Anyway, I've gone on a little bit of a tangent, and I'm streaming this as well, but there you go. So this is a presentation I gave, sort of analyzing interactive narrative, sort of, but it's got a couple of points that I want to talk about. So I'm going to start off with this opening clip, right? Have I done this with you guys?
I think so.
Yeah, I think we have.
Ah, shit, I have. Okay, perfect. No, that's good. If I've done it, that's cool. Then I can jump ahead, right? So,
It's been like 5 or 6 months, and I'm still nodding, expecting you to see me nodding.
oh, that's what's going on. Oh, okay, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
That's okay. My current level 4s, they just go in the chat. It's really kind of weird.
Wait, you haven't seen me sign languaging this whole time?
See, I know you're lying because you're not Ben, right? So. Ooh. Oh, ups. No, we want to jump a little bit
I feel
further
like that's
down.
actually more of an insult to Ben, actually, so never mind.
No, it was meant to be an insult to Ben. Fell flat. Don't worry, ignore it. Fell flat. Fell flat.
I stick completely, so I'll just
What about it?
I'll just skip to the moral landscape. Yeah, we'll skip to the moral landscape.
Yeah, we'll just skip to the moral landscape here, right? All right, so this is what we're going to be talking about today, right? So let's kind of move forward, right? So I want to start off, before I dive into moral landscape, I want to talk about with you guys this idea of 9 basic plots. I've heard many incarnations of this over the years. It started off being three plots. You've got the basics of man versus technology, man versus his environment, and all that kind of stuff, right? So I want to kind of step back and take a look at these and sort of discuss them. So there's this more recent contemporary theory that there were only 9 basic plots and everything's sort of a development of that, right? So they are the overcoming the monster, right? So that's one of our collective favorites in terms of how we define the hero's journey. And this is building on what Joseph Campbell talked about, right? There's the rags to riches type story. And there's the quest, so the search for something. There's a voyage and a return, which is similar to the quest, but not necessarily, right? There's comedy, there's tragedy, there's the story that is about rebirth or redemption or a renewal of spirit or forgiveness and that kind of thing. There's the mystery that's being solved, right? And then there's rebellion against the one. And in this case, the one could be like the man or government or society or, the empire, that kind of a thing, right? So it's interesting. I wanted to kind of take a look at this and say, well, what have we got that's sort of in common with all of these 9 basic plots, right? So have a think about that. Actually, I'm just gonna go for a quick comfort break. I'll be right back. And a quick cup of coffee.
Oh wait, we gotta quick get back to the jokes. Entertain the stream.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure we're meant to be discussing. No. I think Aldi's went through our jokes. Stream and waiting.
What do you call a boomerang that won't come back?
I don't know.
A stick.
Nope. Where you at? Okay. Nope. I read that one. What does Moses? Wait, how does Moses make his coffee? He brews it.
It is.
No, not really.
What?
Where did Sally go during the bombing? Oh god.
What can I hear in the background?
Everywhere.
Dude was just laughing like a lot.
Did it? No?
Oh right, I'm hearing through the stream. Right.
Okay, I got it. Why should you never date a tennis player?
Because it'll cause a racket.
Because love means nothing to them. I prefer the racket one actually. What happened when the strawberry attempted to cross the road? It realised it had no arms, legs, and it wasn't conscious in any way, so it just stayed there. There was a traffic jam!
What do you call a dinosaur that crashes his car?
Hello?
Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Oh. How do you find Will Smith and Snow? You look for the Fresh Prince.
Not gonna lie, whenever I think of Will Smith, I always think of that Will Smith. Yes, Will Smith. Me.
Oh, boys, I know. You know what they say about cliffhangers?
Sure.
What's I feel like whenever Bibin tells a joke, I feel like I am living in plot number 1.
I just realised it's expanded.
What?
It's grown.
Just for the record, and just, so it looks like I've done
The
something.
meme.
I think it's overcoming the monster, quest, tragedy, and maybe a little bit of mystery. That I'm the good student. Why can't orphans play basic? Because they don't know where home is.
Because they're too busy dressing up as bats. Oh.
All right, back, guys. One of the benefits of working from home, the ability to just kind of duck out and grab a coffee and stuff like that. Have you guys been entertaining my stream?
Yeah, we've been interacting with the viewers.
Yeah, we can say some epic jokes.
Epic joke. Oh my god. Edit, cut, edit. It's fine. So, what do you think of this in terms of commonality? What do you think is the common point to all of this? Whoa! Dead silence. Are you guys still there?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Sorry,
All right. Cool.
I was doing sign language again.
Okay. Well, let's move on. Right. I want you to sort of think about that. So this one's an interactive slide. Okay. So we've taken a look at the different basic plots. Right. By the way, this is not a formula. We're going to come back to this. I'm showing you this to give you an idea of the rhythm of what's out there, but then we're going to come up with our own stories, hopefully only marginally influenced by this. But let's talk about what are the character basics for the hero. Are there any basic hero types? Let's fill this in. right? So I'll start off with the alcoholic cop, right? The redemption hero, right? The down and out alcoholic cop. He's in trouble with the captain, barely holding on to his job, is suddenly assigned a serial killer case, right? So there's that redemption hero. Any other type of hero?
Superhero.
So what typifies a superhero?
It's like a coming of age. Like, usually it's them gaining their powers and then to live with their powers and then that place in that world.
That's cool. I wonder if that's the best way to describe it. A coming of age hero. Unlocked potential, maybe?
Yeah.
So right away, there's a bit of difficulty because there's quite a few different types of superheroes. This is not the only one, right? So I'm going to take that superhero out. But there's definitely that coming of age hero, right? Unlocked potential.
John McClane gets 1 bullet point by himself.
Sorry?
John McClane, he gets 1 bullet point by himself. John McClane.
John McClane.
John McClane.
He's the redemption hero. Sorry,
Yeah.
right? But there's John Wick,
Oh.
right? He's typified, and I'm just making these up on the spot. I don't have any idea, right? So we're working this out together. So skill. The one thing that typifies John Wick is he's incredibly skilled, right? Is he a redemption hero? He might actually be, I think. But the vengeance here, really, the Avenger, really, to be honest, right? Somebody who achieves vengeance. I was watching The Equalizer 1 and 2 over the last couple of days, and that's definitely an Avenger type of hero, right? Have you guys seen that, by the way?
Yeah.
I was quite surprised. I was just like, oh, another throwaway movie. I didn't really hear much about it. I mean, obviously it did huge at the box office, but I just thought,
I wasn't honestly until someone told me about it. I went to it, like, really good.
yeah, I was surprised. It's surprisingly good, right? So yeah. Any other types of heroes?
I don't know. What was Thomas from? Like the happy-go-lucky hero. So someone like Jack Sparrow.
Adventurer. So happy-go-lucky, but what makes him the hero, right? So this is the interesting bit, right? So I like that. The happy-go-lucky. Devil may care. The devil may care hero. But they obviously care about something, right? Because they put their lives in jeopardy to be a hero. But that's interesting. That's a good one. I'll leave that one here. There's the Destiny, right? Or the Chosen One.
What about leader for like Thomas from Maze Runner?
Sorry?
Leader, like, you know Thomas from Maze Runner?
Yeah. I would call them the reluctant hero, right? Because they're put in that position to be a leader, right?
I was gonna say, what about anti-heroes? Like,
Yes.
like Deadpool, who just is a miserable hero.
But why do anti-heroes choose to be heroic? That's the question, right?
For a specific act that they want to get. I don't know.
No, I think you're onto something. Have specific
They
goals.
have like one goal that they want to accomplish, and it just happens to be a good goal.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I buy that. I think that's interesting. But yes, definitely, we need to have anti-heroes in there as well. Okay, that's cool. Let's flip over and let's do the villain.
Okay.
The psychopath. I'll put the psychopath and the sociopath in the same sort of category.
I was gonna say sociopath as well.
Yeah.
The hero twin. The villain are basically just the hero but bad.
Yeah. Okay. So hero twin. Trying to figure out what typifies their objectives, right? So
I think usually it's like because they share powers with the hero, they think that the hero is working on like unspent potential.
Or
They're not unlocked.
yep. But what about this? Same goal, different methodologies.
But isn't that the mirror? So like Superman is gonna be General Zod. They're from the same planet. They have the same powers, but two agendas.
Yeah.
No, but they don't have the same goal either.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah.
Well, why? Okay, let's talk about that. Why don't they have the same goal?
Because what was it? General Zod wants to bring back what's the planet called again?
Krypton?
Kryptonite. He wants to resurrect Kryptonite. Krypton, sorry, yeah, Krypton. But Superman doesn't want that because there's already a life there. Yeah.
Well, I think it's a lot. I think it's a lot larger than that, right? Villains seek power. Why do they seek power?
To control.
Control. Thank you. Right. And control leads to what? This is going to be a bit of a leap for you guys. Peace.
I thought you were going to type peach then.
No, Peach. Power begets control begets Peach.
General Zod wants peace for all the Kryptonians.
Wants peace, or let's. This is a subversion of peace, but order, right? To establish order, the new order, the final order, right? Order is peace, right? Chaos is not. Right? This is why a lot of people ask me, why did Thanos just in the end, like he's killed off half the universe, he's got ultimate power, why does he just want to be a farmer? Right? And it's difficult for a lot of people to understand. And I would argue that the creators and the not script writer, but the comic script writers maybe took too much of a leap, a philosophical leap for people to sort of relate to. But I'm hoping by breaking this down, you understand that villains want ultimate power to get ultimate control, to create peace and order. I mean, that's what the Galactic Empire was trying to do. Restore order to the galaxy, right? That's peace.
The whole thing in Assassin's Creed is the assassins want freedom and the Templars want order. They're both trying to go for peace, but the Templars can't see how peace can come from chaos.
Freedom versus order. Autonomy versus society. We are going to get into that, right?
Would you count Elijah Price, Mr. Glass, as psychopath? Because he wanted.
So,
He was trying from Unbreakable.
oh, Mr. Glass. Oh, Mr. Glass?
Yeah. Would you say that he's a psychopath, or would you say because he was trying to create a hero only, and then he was turning himself into a villain?
Oh, yeah.
The destiny kind of thing, because he was a comic book fan and he saw that hero was a virgin. He made himself out to be like a chosen villain. So he put himself in like destiny.
Yeah, to create that hero.
Oh, that's good. There's another, the chosen one, subverted, right? But I want to get back to the hero twin, right? Because I wanted to say why I wrote the first statement, same goal, different methodologies. Because the hero wants peace. So does the villain. It's just the way they achieve it, right? That sets them against each other. So it's kind of like Belloc talking to Indiana Jones, saying, we're both archaeologists. We both, want to collect and preserve antiquities. It's just your way of doing it is different from mine. Right?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Any other sort of villain types you can think of?
The redeemed villain, would they count?
Sorry?
A villain that redeems themselves at the end, they change.
No.
Would that be a hero?
No. Yeah, we'll talk about that. So for me, the one key element that makes a villain is no remorse, right? I just got to jot that down because that's really a key ingredient. And you know why? Why that's a key ingredient? They haven't learned anything, right? Stories are what? Problems that need to be solved, right? Right? So the hero solves it. The hero changes. Or doesn't, but something around the hero's world changes. The villain never changes. Because that's the contrast. They are the problem that continues to exist. Right? I mean, if a problem constantly changes, then it's not really a problem, right? If it's a problem one day but cool the next day, then it's not really an issue, right? It's an annoyance, but it's not an issue. But if there's a constant problem, which we'll talk about in terms of moral philosophy, right? Then then it's vexing. And I think the villain represents that, right?
I think I got training this. Denzel Washington was corrupted.
Corrupted, yeah. I think we can put that one down. Yeah, that's cool.
What
wait.
about like
Anti-villain? Because there has to be a villain. There should be an anti-villain.
Is there an anti-villain? That's an interesting
there is
question.
anti-villain.
Would be an
I'm gonna put that down because I'm not an anti-villain.
I feel like I don't know. This might be a big jump, but
Yeah.
is Thanos not an anti-villain?
Yeah, let's think about that, right? Or is it just the fact that Thanos just has a different methodology? Is he a hero twin? Right?
Like, he doesn't necessarily do villainous things. He just does one. He has one specific goal, like the anti-hero,
Yeah.
and when he does it, he's happy.
I actually like that, but I think the anti-villain's key ingredient needs to be regret. Why? Because regret demonstrates a change in thinking and a change in emotional state and a change in world values, right? And that's something I don't think a villain would necessarily ever have. Going back to this, no remorse, they haven't learned anything, no regrets, right? But an anti-villain maybe is one that has a regret. Oftentimes you'll see them as, what do they call it? The shapeshifter, right? So the shapeshifter, according to Campbell's sort of definition of that archetype, is somebody who changes allegiances, right?
So is Loki an anti-villain?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good one. I think that's the best example. Right? Because he does join the good fight.
He does.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between anti-villain and anti-hero?
I think we're trying to look at them as opposites, and I wonder if that's valid, actually. We're trying to look at the anti-villain as the opposite of the anti-hero. But I mean, an anti-hero is somebody who's heroic despite not... So if we were to look at the true opposite of an anti-hero, right? So an anti-hero is somebody who could quite possibly be a villain, but is actually quite heroic, right? Lisbeth Salander from the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo kind of immediately springs to mind, right? So an anti-villain by that logic would be a villain, would be somebody who looks like a good guy, but is actually a villain. Right? So in that definition, I don't know if Loki applies. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So an anti-villain would still be a villain.
But he wasn't in the beginning.
Yeah, he was, Yeah, it might still work if you think about Loki's upbringing, right? So has qualities of a hero, but is actually a villain. I'm going to put Loki back, actually. Yeah. In this regard, Loki is quite a complex villain, eh? Very interesting. Right?
As for different types, is Mastermind a type of villain? Like, early on Avengers 1 Loki, where he was sort of had to devised this whole plan with a bunch of stuff, and he wasn't really in the main fight till the very end, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So are you talking about Mastermind from the animated?
No, as in like an actual
Oh.
mastermind villain type.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting, right? Because I think there was an audience shift at some point. This is why it's making it difficult to talk about this. I think there was an audience shift at some point where people wanted Loki to be heroic. You know, there's that whole controversy of Loki disguising himself as the Hulk and yada yada yada. You know, so there's some interesting sort of things there to me that indicate that the audience wanted Loki to be a good guy, right? Well, actually, the bottom line is that Loki was appealing to fans because he's an incredibly complex character, right? You know, by that same token, an anti-hero would be what's his name from The Walking Dead, the biker dude, Daryl, yeah, right. So Daryl would be, in my estimation, a good example of an anti-hero, right? Daryl, The Walking Dead.
I don't know.
Yep.
I don't think Daryl fits into the anti-hero guys.
Oh yeah. Okay. Go on.
Well, the way that we've described, I mean, like, the way that we've described anti-heroes so far is they're people that just happen to be doing good things but could quite easily be the bad guy.
Right.
But, like, I feel like there's a lot of times, especially earlier on with his brother, I forgot his name, Mel or something.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, Daryl could just have easily have turned to be with his brother, but instead he was like, nah.
Ah. So Daryl, in that regard, could also be a redemption story, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting. The fact that we can't pigeonhole Daryl is what makes him very, very interesting, right? So again, this is the danger of me opening with the 9 basic plots, is because I don't want us to pigeonhole ourselves into a single container and be stuck there, right? Okay, this is cool. It's an interesting exercise. I'm going to sort of move on. Okay, so from that, I sort of jumped ahead and tried to surmise what our discussion would be about. But it's interesting. You guys did fall in with where I thought the conversation would go, right? And at the heart of it, or one of the many things that are at the heart of it, is this idea of autonomy versus conformity, right? So, and it ties back to the presentation I gave you before in the analysis of narrative mechanics, right? Is the good of the many? Does the good of the many far outweigh the good of the few or the one? Or does the good of the one outweigh the good of the many? And I think that this is a powerful central tenet of storytelling, right? Is that we can use the narrative landscape to wrestle with these questions, right? So individual free will, is that more important than creating a peaceful society, right? So this is our moral landscape, because creating a peaceful society requires adherence to what? A code, a law, right? Now, we could say autonomy. Autonomy is more popular, most definitely, right? This idea of free will and individuality, right? But isn't that the pathway for which a villain succeeds? Because a villain doesn't care what societal norms are. They are fully exercising their free will, right? So it's interesting, right? So a lot of these questions that come up in storytelling inform our moral landscape. And this last statement is something that I firmly believe in all my years of studying story. Because all religion, philosophy, psychology, jurisprudence, narrative seeks to explain one thing, and that is the reason behind human suffering, right? That's at the kind of heart of it, right? Whether it's religion, don't worry about the suffering, because if you seek forgiveness when you die, you'll be rewarded by the kingdom of heaven. If it's philosophy, then it's a different tact, saying human suffering elevates sort of the human condition towards transcendence, et cetera, right? And That's why I believe the essential core of narrative is identifying a problem that needs to be solved, right? Because audience are consistently looking for the reason behind human suffering, right? So, just like in the prior presentation I gave to you guys about consequentialist moral reasoning and categorical moral reasoning, they're the two things that inform our decisions on whether or not we believe in autonomy or society, right? So consequentialist moral reasoning, morality is in the consequences. So the ends justifies the means. So this is utilitarianism, pioneered by Jeremy Bentham in the 18th century, right? And the diametric opposite to that is categorical moral reasoning, right? So certain duties, rights, certain categories dictate morality, right? Regardless of the outcome. So death before dishonor, right? So both are popular, right? Ends justifies the means. Death before dishonor, right? And this is the categorical imperative, or your single moral obligation. This categorical moral reasoning is more kind of attuned to autonomy and was developed by Immanuel Kant, right? So what's at stake in our everyday lives, right? Well, it's this idea of human suffering and moral reasoning finding a justification for human suffering, which we then interpret in moral law, philosophy, storytelling, you name it, right? So here's the problem, and something I want you guys to consider in terms of storytelling, right? So all of the stuff that we talk about in terms of philosophy and narrative and stuff, we're discussing what we already know, right? We're discussing problems we already know, solutions we've already tried, right? So if we take a look at the redemptive hero arc, right? The alcoholic cop that redeems themselves, or the coming of age hero unlocking their potential. It's all stuff we know. There's no great surprises here. And everything we talked about today, no great surprises, no huge amounts of revelation, right? We already know about these problems. We know about various solutions either that we've tried or we've known other people who have tried to circumvent the conditions of their life. To arrive at sort of an original vision or interpretation, we need to take from familiar, unquestioned settings, we are seeking to make it strange, right? So let's estrange ourselves from the familiar, and this is what invites and provokes our audience into a new way of seeing things. So Loki is the best example, right? So if we take what's familiar and comfortable, oh, villains are over here, heroes are over there, right? Let's make it strange. Let's make it difficult to pigeonhole Loki. And that will provoke discussion, right? And that's essentially what we want to do. So really, and again, this harkens back to the ideas that we were coming up with in terms of, let's talk about the demon story world and the rules that govern the demon. You know, so far, we've come up with some very cool ideas, but nothing really innovative, right? Until we started making it a bit strange, right? And for me, that moment occurred when we looked at the opposite journey of a soldier's corruption. So can a demon or a minion be kind of conversely corrupted and start to discover their humanity again? That's interesting. Never seen before. It's very strange, right? And worth exploring because it does provoke a little bit of thought, right? So, any comments on that so far? Yeah. So here's why estranging ourselves from the familiar is deeply fascinating, right? And what's at stake in our lives. So let's take a look at the profile of a world-renowned scientist. World-renowned scientist. Everybody across the globe knows this person. He's got a doctorate in anthropology. And immediately after that, earned another doctorate in medicine and studied philosophy for years in Munich, right? I want you to carefully think about that because these are wonderful academic achievements, right? So obviously can we agree that this would be somebody who was a very deep thinker? Can we agree that this would be somebody that is a very deep thinker?
Yeah. We got to say no because if we say yes, he's going to be like, well, actually.
Well, actually.
psychological move. I like it.
Well, actually, that's Joseph Mengele.
There
Right.
we go.
You know who Joseph Mengele is? So, do you guys know who Joseph Mengele is?
Not a clue.
The angel of death of Auschwitz used to conduct genetic experiments on Jewish prisoners. Right? Vicious, cruel, evil man. But studied philosophy. Doctorate in medicine, doctorate in anthropology, both of which have since been revoked by the universities, right? For obvious reasons. Right? But the minute we take the familiar and we estrange it, we come up with something interesting because the audience goes, doctorate in anthropology, doctorate in medicine, studied philosophy. Why? Joseph Mengele, why?
God damn, I can't look at someone else. I can't look at the way. God damn, he's a sick bastard. God damn. Damn, I know Hannibal Lecter was crazy. Jesus.
But here's the risk to us as storytellers, though, right? It's taking Thanos and putting him on the farm at the end. If it's too big a leap, if we don't plant enough seeds to say, this is what Thanos was after, it's just too much. You just go, no, that's not possible, right? So if we didn't understand Joseph Mengele's history, so if I went back and I didn't show you Joseph Mengele, I said a character who has 2 doctorates and is a philosopher is a brutal mass murderer. You go, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense, right? Why would a philosopher be a murderer? That's just weird. That's just like a Greenpeace guy who loves automatic weapons. It just doesn't make sense, right? So we need that history. We need that connective tissue, that narrative supplies to say, look, these are the conditions that created this. And this is how we create very complex villains, right? And heroes for that matter. And that complexity is what people enjoy, right? Creating messy heroes, messy villains that don't fit neatly into one category or another is our job, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the restlessness of reason. And I'm talking about this because it harkens back to the problem that needs to be solved, right? So we've been telling stories for years. We've been talking about moral problems for years, right? Surely we're running out of story ideas. Surely we're solving all of these different things, right? So I'll start off by a quote from a book called The Gorgias, and it's a conversation between Socrates and Callicles, right? Do you guys know who Socrates is? Socrates from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure? Yeah. So Callicles is trying to talk to his buddy Socrates, whose lifelong dedication to philosophy bordered on the obsessive, right? So, Callicles was telling Socrates, look, philosophy is a pretty toy when one indulges in it with moderation at the right time of life. Pursuing it further will lead to absolute ruin, right? Abandon argument. Look, man, get a real job. Go out there, join the rest of the world, get a real job, right? So Callicles has a point, right? Because philosophy tends to distance us from conventions, from established assumptions, from settled beliefs, right? To me, philosophy is at the heart of what drives narrative fiction. Because we're taking those conventions and those established assumptions and those settled beliefs and we're smashing them, right? And we're taking a look at the pieces that we've created from it afterwards and trying to reconstruct it, right? And just to try to figure out how it works, right? And philosophy questions everything, right? So now there's a characteristic evasion of philosophical reasoning, right? And that evasion is skepticism, right? And skepticism is not a solution. Skepticism is a healthy way of thinking. But skepticism is often looked at as a fringe art, as nonconformist thinking, as thinking outside of the box. And it's all completely valid, all completely true, right? But there's one thing about skepticism that is an essential problem with it, in that it doesn't offer a solution, right? It questions the solutions that are sometimes offered, but it doesn't offer one of its own, right? So when you deal with skeptics or classic skeptics in literature and philosophy, they just generally tend to agree to disagree, right? Is where they end up, right? They will say that these certain moral problems that you are talking about are unsolvable. There's nothing more to be said about it, right? And then the response to skepticism is that the recurrence and persistence of, say, certain problems suggests that they are unavoidable, right? That we will confront them on a daily basis, right? So whether it's a philosophy of, whether it's autonomy versus society, right? They're not going away. In fact, the opposite of going away. They're in front and center in our face every day. Whether it's the runaway train going down the train track, or the patient that needs a transplant, and then a perfectly healthy person in the waiting room that has the organs that this person needs, but has come in for a different operation, right? So this is the estrangement of the everyday things that occur, and then trying to understand that these problems are unavoidable because they will occur, and we need to find answers for those. And finding answers for those in the world of story is interesting to me and fun. And we live some of the answers to those questions every day, right? So we come up with compromises, on-the-spot decisions, and things like that kind of help us marry those distinct ways of thinking, right? So Immanuel Kant had this quote about skepticism, right? And he's saying skepticism is not wrong. Skepticism is a resting place for human reason, where it can reflect upon its dogmatic wanderings, but it is no dwelling place for permanent settlement, right? So you can be skeptical, but it's not a way of living your life. Simply to acquiesce to skepticism can never suffice to overcome the restlessness of reason. And this is what this means, right? You can be satisfied that you've brought up a good skeptical counter argument, but if you haven't solved the problem via skepticism, you will be restless. That problem will still be there. It'll still be there to be solved, right? I forgot why I wanted to end on skepticism, but skepticism is an essential ingredient to be able to take a step back and question some of the moral dilemmas that we're putting together. So, practical example, let's go back and take a look at exist, right? So one of the moral dilemmas we left off last class with is this idea of, okay, now we've got Raven inhabiting the body of this little girl. Somewhere inside the little girl's head, she's there as well, but trapped in the dark, crying, right? So we have a potential moral dilemma, right? Raven can sacrifice herself to restore the girl, but she needs the girl, no matter what pain is being caused to the girl, to be able to find her body and to track down Bale and do, all kinds of stuff, heroic stuff, at the cost of this little girl. The more I thought about it last week, the more I'm like, wow, that's a really interesting dilemma, right? For Raven to be a hero, she has to cause a little 10-year-old girl's suffering. Jesus, that's crazy, right? But we run into that every day, right? Not us personally. Case in point, kids in cages at the Mexican border, right? 70 million people support that. 70 million people go, yeah, that's a good idea. Obviously, I don't agree, but... And those self-same 70 million people say, well, the previous president did that too. As if that makes it good. Actually, this is an interesting point about skepticism. Just a metaphor for skepticism. I think whataboutism disguises itself as skepticism, right? What I'm doing is wrong. Oh yeah, what about this guy? He does the same thing too. Suddenly that's an answer? Is that an answer? It's like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, cool. That other guy's doing it too, so that makes it morally right. Right? These are the questions that I want to be able to put down on the page, right? And I want to interest you guys in putting down on the page for your stories. Because they're fascinating discussions to have. And again, it all ties back to autonomy versus society, right? Right? So I put here autonomy versus conformity. And I put community in brackets because conformity is seen negatively. I don't want to be conforming, right? Conformists are considered sheep, right? Well, that's not really what it's about. How much of your free will do you sacrifice to effectively contribute to the community? So let's go back to Star-Lord, right? Star-Lord shouldn't have done what he did because his love doesn't matter when it comes to saving the universe. God, that's a difficult moral question, right? One that survived story development, storyboarding, previs, production, shooting, and editorial, right? That moral dilemma survived that entire process and made it into the movie because it's a powerful question. So which one do you guys support? Autonomy or community? That's okay. The fact that none of you dived all over the answer is reassuring. Because it means that these are questions that still need to be solved. And the fun of storytelling is we get an opportunity in a fictional arena to pick one that we like and explore it. Right? Okay, so any questions about that? Thoughts or comments? I find this stuff infinitely interesting to discuss and bring into the stories. And it affects everything that I write, right? Even if it's a half a second moment of indecision that flicks through the hero's eyes, it all comes down to the choices the hero is making that sometimes reflect choices that we're faced with every day. And what makes us lean forward in our seats is trying to figure out what the hero would do contrary to what we would do, or reflecting what we would do, right? Are they going to do this? Because that's what I would do, right? And that's what makes it engaging. So why is this important? Where does it all fall flat? Well, it falls flat when we don't have this kind of justification for certain things. So let me pick on a really bad movie, The Scorpion King, right? Now, well, instantly we all think of the really bad CG, right? But above and beyond that, there's no justification for Dwayne Johnson's character in that to physically become a scorpion, right? I mean, the idea is abysmal, but a character metamorphosizing into an insect can be done effectively, as in Kafka's Metamorphosis, and become hugely successful, popular, culturally significant. Right? I know we're talking about a movie with The Rock, but I think that same level of thinking needs to go into just escapist fiction, i.e. Star Wars, the Empire, and its blatant representation of fascism taken to an extreme, right? Or any episode of Star Trek or Doctor Who. Sci-fi is wonderful because sci-fi seems to be the one genre, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the one genre where you can wrestle with huge moral dilemmas. But interestingly enough, because it's set in the future, we are more open to it. If you know what I mean. I mean, you look at Data, and there were episodes, well, in Star Trek, there was an episode of dealing with a society of gender-neutral people. And there's a massive discussion on gender identity inside Star Trek. And it was an incredibly engaging and entertaining episode. But sci-fi allows us to deal with these types of things. Anything set in the future. So the one where what's that show called? Where the Nazis won the war? The Man Who in the High Tower, is it? I haven't seen it, but, it's set in the future and it allows us to wrestle with these questions, right? So for me, I think that's fascinating in terms of, especially with sci-fi, that we can take these ideas and wrestle with them. Same with, again, tying it back to the Hunger Games, right? So the Hunger Games is like a pseudo-fictional, possibly futuristic society, right? Where we can talk about questions of... The reason why the Mockingjay was a political symbol was to reflect the idea that the left is no better than the right, right? So President Snow was no better than, what's her name, who was leading the resistance. They were both equally evil, right? So that's interesting, refreshing, and possibly can only be handled in science fiction and has a certain amount of resonance, right? So, yeah. So, again, oh yeah, and the last point I wanted to make, sort of same on the Dwayne Johnson. I did finally watch the Doom film. Which, you know, surprisingly, the Doom film, you know, with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So there were actually some interesting ingredients in there that could have worked. The big thing why I wanted to bring that up is that towards the end, right, The Rock sort of disguises his evil choices as duty, as doing the mission, as following the mission. And then suddenly he gets infected and goes psychotic. And there's no justification for it. There was no build for it. There's no hint in his personality that he was going to go that way. Therefore, the character was flat. Right? So this is what we were trying to avoid. What we want to do is we want to be able to go, look, this character's like this, like this, like this, and he's Joseph Mengele. We want to surprise our audience, but in a way where they go, yeah, I can see that. Because when you look at Joseph Mengele as well, you know he's a doctor. You know he's a studied academic, right? So you know that that's part of his ingredients, right? So I guess at the heart of it, that's what we're trying to do with our characters, right? And again, not all of our study and analysis will end up on the screen. Well, it might, in a very subtle way, like an eyebrow raise or a head tilt, right? Or a moment of doubt. So we dive really, really, really deep into the psychology of our characters. For what? So they can have a half-second head tilt when faced with a tough decision. That's it. But that speaks volumes to an audience and has a resonating effect. And that's why I think the Star-Lord sequence didn't work, because it didn't have that power coming from that depth. Right? It should have been a struggle. It should have been the first time we saw the happy-go-lucky character of Star-Lord actually become wholly human and affected and suffering with the decision, right? And then I think we would have bought it. I think that's what it is. Maybe it wasn't an easy way to have Thanos win, but it definitely felt like an easy decision for Star-Lord, didn't it? It was an easy decision for him. And it should not have been easy. It should not have been easy, right? So I think that's where the problem lay. Okay, cool. That's it for me for today.
You've seen the good news. Do you want to become famous by following
I know.
and viewers on
I know.
bigfollowers.com?
I know.
And
I gotta.
two people.
I'm gonna ban Saduk.
Bye Saduk.
Bye, Saduk.
Nom nom.
Oh, weird. It's not. I banned Saduk, but I can't refresh the window. Where is it here? Right? See,
Nom
like.
nom gets to stay.
No, that's. How do I refresh the chat window? Ah, that's frustrating. Okay, I'll deal with those guys later.
Top right, refresh chat.
Oh yeah, pff, there you go. Thank you. I'm blind. No, that got rid of them all. Thanks, David. Thanks for that.
Nom gets to stay.
No! All the comments about our jump card.
I'm sure they were flooded chat with
Hey, they
ha ha
were
ha's.
no problem.
Oh no! Oh no! I made a mistake. The whole time I was talking you guys through this, my screen was showing my other monitor. Wow. Oh man, that really sucks. Holy cow. I was streaming my other monitor, not the one that I was intending to when I was talking to you guys. Oh, that really sucks. Well, there was nothing visual to show anyway. Most of it was just sort of a discussion, right, with us. So
The best part was obviously our jokes, yeah.
that was the best.
The pinnacle,
That was-
the pinnacle of
That was the highlight. Yeah, that was the highlight.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll leave it at that,
Okie dokie.
and I will let you guys go. I haven't forgotten this, guys. I don't see any episode breakdowns, right?
I did it in a Word doc. I
Oh,
can
did you?
copy paste it if you want.
Yeah, I've got it in a Word doc though.
Oh yeah. Oh okay. All right. You can either. I think I sent you a link to the drive location, so you can either drop it in the drive location.
Paste it in now then.
Yeah. Well, what? Yeah, you can copy paste it. Yeah, that should be fine. Yeah. So just again, right click here and then make a copy, right, and label it whatever you want. Episode 2, episode 3, right. All right. It doesn't matter. You can number them sequentially because then we'll sit back and we'll sort of reorder them to try to figure out how they would fit in with the story flow, right?
Oh wait, I think I clicked the wrong link. This one.
I'm gonna do that.
Oh, I'm gonna exit out of this spreadsheet so you guys can access it, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
I got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Wait, so what am I right clicking copying?
You know the yellow tabs towards the far right. There's one called EPO1. I can just shut this down.
Yeah.
Yeah, EPO1. Just right click,
Like that.
move or copy,
Got it.
right? Yeah. And then create an EPO2 and EPO3. It doesn't matter how you number it, right? Because we'll be we can always shift those around.
I'll just go to. Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna actually stop the stream. Man, that's two major